Greetings and welcome, brothers and sisters, to the New Black Media. Today's broadcast is a very serious one. I want your attention. This broadcast is about reparations. If Germany atoned for the Holocaust, the United States can pay for reparations, is what the headline reads from the National Interest. Now, family, first and foremost, I'd like to say that the stories we've been hearing about the discussion of reparations, unfortunately, is not led by us. I hope you realize what a very tragic mistake that will be. With that, I want to propose that before we leave it up to others to make the claims that's necessary to make a wrong right again, in other words, to make America great again, if you will. I'll use those words very loosely because America, let's be honest, has never been great for anyone. But I digress. This discussion of reparations should be led by us. So, when we hear discussions about how much money are we speaking of, and how and who is it going to benefit, and who should benefit from it, we should be in those discussions all the time. I've noticed that lamestream media has put black faces in front of us to speak for us, and they're not speaking our language. And so this video is going to touch on that for a bit. But before I get into that, I want to pause for a minute so you can take a listen to the figures that other people are speaking of when they talk about our reparations. I want you to hear the figures that they're talking about, and then I want to cover a video that I did some time ago. And for those of you who are my faithful longtime subscribers, you'll remember the video because you saw it on my page. It was about Dr. John Franklin, but I'll get back to that. For now, let's take a listen on what other people think the dollar amount should be, but I want you to hear how confused they are as to who should benefit. So let's take a listen.
The debate over whether or not the United States should pay reparations for slavery to African American citizens continues even after last week's House Judiciary Committee hearing started discussing that matter. But how much would restitution actually cost if the U.S. government decided to go forward with reparations? Yahoo Finance's Kristen Myers is here to crunch the numbers for us. Kristen?
Yep, as always. So let's tackle that very big question, Adam. Exactly how much is this going to cost? I know we have a graphic here for you guys. The answer is just under $20 trillion. So on one hand, you have the figure of the unpaid wages that were not paid to slaves for well over a century. We've got those numbers there. 12.9 trillion is that number in today's 2019 dollars. But then you also have the lingering negative economic impact from Jim Crow and other racial injustices. And that figure comes in at $4.2 trillion. So when you add that all up, that's $17.1 trillion that some researchers are saying is the amount that needs to be added to reparations. The question here, though, is who is going to be receiving any money if we ever do pay reparations, and how are we going to actually distribute that restitution? So right now they're saying there's 40 million Americans in the United States that identify as Black. They say that 30 million of them are direct descendants from slaves and could be eligible for these reparations. Now, the big question on how this is going to be done really lingers, and that's actually what H.R. 40, that House bill that you actually mentioned in the intro that's being debated right now, that's what that bill aims to figure out. Who is going to be receiving these payments, and what's the proposal to get it done? Some people say, listen, we need a trust fund for Black Americans to help them pay for college, to help them buy a home. Others are saying, we need to just do lump sum payments. There's obviously criticisms there with that. But essentially, there's a lot of questions about reparations, if it's even going to happen. A lot of political candidates, we might be hearing about that tonight. Kamala Harris have said that they do support actually some form of reparations, but nationally, the figures are not looking so good. On a national level, only 26% of Americans actually say that they support reparations. Over 80% of white Americans say they do not support the measure. A little over half of African Americans, of course, say that they do. So a lot of questions remain there, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more in the debates going forward.
So, family, you just heard how much they estimated what's due to ADOS, or Foundational Black Americans. But I say that number is way too low. Yes, that's right. Dr. John Hope Franklin wrote about this some time ago, and I did a video back in March of 2019, and it was titled 100 trillion for reparations scratches the surface. That's right, 100 trillion for reparations scratches the surface. And here they come, this group of reporters on a TV owned by, I don't know, but nonetheless, they want to try to tell us what they owe us. And I say that the number is far too low. And ADOS, it's up to us to stand up and fight for what's right. This is for our ancestors. This is what they did. They made this possible for this nation to even boast of MAGA, to even boast about saying, make America great again. It's because of foundational Black Americans. Let's be clear. So when they ask the question on who should be compensated, you know good and well who should be compensated. We have records of foundational Black Americans whose ancestors have been here and who we have been here as a testament. We have records of that, and so do you. So when you try to play like you can't figure it out, we know this is smoke screens. So about this article, if Germany atoned for the Holocaust, the United States can pay reparations for slavery. So the idea of paying reparations for slavery is gaining momentum in the United States, despite being long derided as an unrealistic plan to compensate for state terrorism and violence committed against foundational Black Americans ancestors who are now long dead. The topic saw substantive debate in the July 30th Democratic primary debate, with candidate Marianne Williamson calling slavery, quote, a debt that is owed. And while I'm on that subject, I have a picture of Randall Robinson, who wrote the book, The Debt, and it's about reparations. I would suggest reading it. I've read it. It's been some time since I've read it, but I definitely suggest reading that book. But nonetheless, some Democratic congressional representatives are also pushing for financial recompense for the descendants of enslaved people. Yes, these were human beings that this government enslaved. Let's be clear. They were not just slaves who came along and you brought your ancestors, kidnapped them, and brought them here to build this nation. But anyways, calls for reparations in the United States are generally met with skepticism. What would reparations achieve? They ask. Who would receive them and under what conditions? Other countries have tackled these questions. In 1995, South Africa established its TRC, or Truth, and Reconciliation Commission and paid reparations to the victims of apartheid. 8 years before, the United States apologized to 82,000 Japanese Americans unduly imprisoned during World War II and paid them 20,000 United States dollars each to compensate for their suffering. So when it comes to the builders of this nation, when it comes to the righteous people who put blood, sweat, and tears, and you terrorized and tortured and forced to build this nation for free, this is a check long overdue. Even Germany, birthplace of the worst racism ever institutionalized and elevated to official policy, has some lessons for the United States as it considers reparations. Well, I want to turn that around just a bit, because I don't know who actually wrote this article, but when you say the birthplace of the worst racism ever institutionalized, Germany, I beg to differ. It has been here, the United Snakes of America. You see, in this nation, the worst Holocaust ever perpetrated against mankind has been that against the foundational Black Americans. That is a fact. That is something you cannot erase. That is the truth. So help me God. So, I end this video off by asking you who is watching and or listening to this broadcast to take a minute, and in the description I'm going to leave a link to my other video that I've done some time ago, back in March of 2019, on Dr. John Franklin, who says 100 trillion for reparations scratches the surface. And as a matter of fact, before I leave off, I'm going to leave off with this, and I hope Professor Black Truth is not going to be upset with me, but I leave with his words of wisdom. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe on your way out. Thanks for listening. Peace out.
And that means you're on the right freaking track. This nation and everyone in it, they owe their prosperity to us, because we are the only ones who made it possible. There's a reason why the American economic miracle could not be replicated anywhere else on earth. Because A, you did not have the absolutely unique and indispensable dynamo of foundational blacks to power it, and second of all, you can stockpile a lot of wealth when you don't have to pay the people who made the wealth possible. Not merely our labor in the killing fields of the American South, but also our intellectual property, our human resource, our intellectual resource, our spiritual resource. There is so much that we imbued into this empire of evil. There is so much that we have given to the world that we haven't been credited for, to say nothing of compensated for. And we're saying enough is enough.